me. Well, okay, transactional analysis, everybody. What do you remember about last week about TA?
Three parts.
3 parts. Yes. So, what were the 3 parts? Parent, adult, child. What does that resemble very much? What work has this evolved from? Freud's, yeah. Freud's above I, and it, or the Latin, is id, ego, and superego. Excellent stuff. That's good, but last week we didn't concentrate too much on ego states. In fact, we didn't really touch them. We touched on other stuff last week.
Scripts.
Life scripts, massive things. What in particular about life scripts did we discuss and the pertinence of them last week?
That we're born with them and it's how we grow up and then big changes.
Not particularly that we're born with them, but how we grow up, yes. A map, yeah. And the map is not the territory. So it's a distorted. Basically, as children, we devise ways, when we interact with parents first and foremost, we devise ways to respond. Right? And that way of responding, so we may sulk, we may blame, we may become conformists. And this is all done via what's called script messages. Remember that? Script messages. And there's 2 types of script message. What were the 2 types of script messages?
Verbal and non-verbal.
Verbal and non-verbal is correct. It's not quite what I'm looking for, but yeah, verbal and non-verbal is correct. I should have couched that differently, really. But there's 2 types of script messages. That answers that question perfectly well, by the way, Rachel. There's another answer I'm looking for.
Is it when you write your own? The command, where you write your own, make your own decisions in your script?
It is, but there's 2 distinct types of
Attributions.
Attributions is what, yeah, you are this, you are that. We absorb them. Don't forget, when a child is very young, the only ego state it's got is child. It hasn't got both the other ones. It doesn't start with an adult and a superego. It doesn't have them then. Remember, this all should all start to fill in. This should all start to fit together with the psychodynamic work we've already done now. Okay, remember we talked about the critical factor. When a child is very young, it absorbs everything because it doesn't have a critical factor. In transactional analysis terms, the critical factor will probably be the adult, the logical, rational, unemotional part of our psyche. The other messages, as well as attributions, were commands. Okay, you do this, you do that, you don't do that, you do this. That molds us as well. So when we talk about transactional analysis, life script, and the formulation of our life script, we're talking primarily about script commands and script attributions. Does everybody understand the difference? I personally think the script attributions are more formative. That's my own personal opinion. Commands are important. So through people telling us what to do, okay, we devise ways to respond. And as children, what ways do we respond in? Blame, sulk, rant and rave, back right off, become, I am more introverted, if you like. We respond in various ways. And it is at that point that we start to formulate how we're going to meet life, how we're going to meet life in general. Okay, that's what's called our life script. We're going to move away from that. So let's have a look at how it fits in with Freud. So again, you've got...
Just with that, how does it work then? You've got, I know we talk, it seems like we talk about just like one parent, one source of it. What if you've got conflicting?
Right.
You know, is one parent, you say, you know, one parent's personality or what they're saying to their ambitions, is that more dominant than the other? You know, how does a child determine if you've got 2 very different?
At the moment, we're just talking about child, and we're talking about parents, really. parental influences.
Yeah.
So the child will devise ways to respond to the parents. If the parents are different,
Yeah.
it may be that the child will become quite conflicted because it will have to devise very clever ways to adapt to both styles of parenting. So the child will have to become quite resourceful, quite flexible. So it could actually enable them to have a wider sort of perspective on life, or it might totally conflict them. It
And
depends.
does a negative one, like, would a negative one outweigh a more positive?
That depends on the context as well. I mean, there's no way of me answering that. I am objectively saying, yes, that is like this.
Yeah.
You'd have to see the situation. You'd have to see the power of the personalities of the parents. But if it's in context with your own life and you want to talk about it, that's fine. That's not a problem. Just get the idea for the moment that the child starts, they call this the personality structure really within TA, but the child starts solely by learning, adapting to the ways, it adapts its responses to the way it's treated as a child, okay? And that's why the child is split into two, and one element of it's called the adaptive child. And the adaptive child is the one that calculates its responses in accordance with incoming information. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We're going to do a lot more about ego states. So we can see how it all starts to fit in with object relations. And I think in answer to your question, Rachel, if we widen our perspective as well, and we look at the objects of the parents and the personalities and the power of them personalities, we're going to glean a lot more information about how the child is being affected.
Yeah.
If we look at the parents specifically, rather than under the umbrella of parent ego state.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Just before we go on to this next bit, what happens then is the child absorbs a lot of this stuff. It devises ways to respond, and often it will use them for life. We're lucky, we've got insight into ourselves. We can change what's not working for us. Yeah? Whereas most people don't have that privilege. But then the child starts to develop the parent ego state. Okay? And you learn a child, especially with siblings, I'm going to tell mummy on you, I'm going to tell daddy on you, that's wrong, that's developing the parent ego state at that point. And then later on, it will adopt the parents. It won't say, I'm going to tell mummy, daddy, and whatever. It'll actually adopt, that's wrong, you don't do that. It's coming from a critical parent ego state. None of these ego states are either positive or negative. They can be both, depending on context. For instance, the critical parents can instill discipline, and it's needed. Okay? The free child, which can be the naughty one who doesn't give a bugger about anybody, also has that liberation, that sense of liberation. It's going to enjoy itself despite everybody else. We're going to go deeply into ego states tonight. This is the backbone. When people talk about transactional analysis, this is what we talk about. So ego states, here we go. Metaphorical groupings of thought, emotion and behaviour. A state, in psychological terms, is at any given moment the set of thoughts and feelings that are going through your mind and your body. That's what a state is. It's now, it's something that you're in now. So whatever sort of condition your mind is in at the moment and the feelings is the state you're in. It's a set of thoughts and feelings at any given moment in time. So now for the good stuff. Recognising the parent's ego state. So we're going to start here, by the way, with parents. Okay, a person in a nurturing parent state is likely to use words such as well done, good, gentle, caring, don't worry. Use a loving, caring, comforting or concerned tone of voice. Use open, encouraging gestures, smiling, leaning forward, nodding of the head, and have a caring, understanding attitude. Okay, the parents are split into two, nurturing parents and critical parents. And the child learns these states while it's young. Okay? But to look at that, you think nature and parents, that's got to be positive. There's no bad part. That can be really manipulative. I love you, I really love you, but you've got to do this. It's more or less conditions of worth come into it as well. So you can see that being a nature and parent can be highly manipulative as well. Can everybody see that?
Yeah.
You can think of, use this in life and watch when people nurture you, but you've got an investment, you want something out of it. That's what a transaction is. There's always an incentive with a transaction. A transaction is one unit of communication. Hello Jean, how are you? That invites a response. That's a transaction. And remember last week there was the invitation? The transaction was split into two parts. There was the invitation. So you invite somebody to take an ego state, if you like. So, hello Jean, how are you? That's adults. I'm inviting you really to go into the adult state. But you might go to church, oh, I've had a bloody awful day and I just need a hug and whatever, that's fine. Then I might go into nature and parents and say, oh, come here, give us a hug. That's the way life goes on, but you'll see the difference. And in a healthy relation, in a healthy psychological, healthy person, they'll flip through these ego states when they're needed. There's no way. Imagine us all being in adult ego state, back to spots. It'd be terrible, wouldn't it? You know, rational logic, but it's needed. I'll tell you why. I'm jumping the gun here, by the way. The parents' ego states and the child ego states are learned behaviour and they're emotionally based. There are programming. But we need a part of our psyche that can stand independent of our conditioning and say, well, that's no good to me now. We need to do this. I don't really have that belief. It's very logical, it's rational, it's unemotional. It is a bit like Dr. Spock. That's all right. When you're trying to, if you erase patterns of behaviour and responses that no longer serve you, you need that element of your psyche. And when we do hypnotherapy, we might call that the critical factor. The adult is the critical factor, if you like. It's the logical, rational part of us that most people go through their life bound to their unconscious conditioning. They never question it. We need a part of our psyche that will challenge our condition and say that. And when we talk about ego strengthening, that's precisely what we're doing. We're strengthening the adult part of us. Okay? Ego in Latin means I. Is the beginning to the bits of the jigsaw coming in together now? So there we go. We've got the nature and parent ego state. We're going to look at this deeply anyway. So, okay, recognising the parent state. This time we're looking at critical parents. We know what the critical parent does. It's that one who's, oh, you come in, you're not doing that right. Oh, you never do anything right, you don't, you know, really. And I respond quite harsh to people like that nowadays. Use words such as bad, should, ought, must, always, ridiculous, unacceptable. Watch when you're using these words yourself. These words make me very unhappy in my life. I should be this way, I ought to do that. It was when I want to do this, come in, I become a happy chappy. Okay, so I do the things I like to do. Use a patronising, critical or disapproving tone of voice. We learn these from our parents quite often. It's not just parents, it's first and foremost in the formative years, normally through our parents, but it's significant others we learn this from. Primarily parents. We can use aggressive gestures, come across as judgmental and authoritarian. These ones who are authoritarian, I find are little children inside. You know, these tough guys who come across, you see them in work, we've got a couple of them in our place, bullies, bottles. And if you were to say something and challenge them, it'll floor them. Because they're little children inside, little terrified children inside. Because you see them outside where they're as nice as pie. You know, so they'd be intimidated and controlled. And so, within our psyche, if we go back to object relations, what we might say here is that we've got two objects here, critical parent and nurturing parent. Both are needed, but if they go out of control, they can cause hell in our lives. This is just a model. Remember what we said in the initial weeks? The mind really is intangible. We can't see it, we can't grasp it with our senses. So we get models. This is a fantastic one. The deeper we go into it, honestly, it's a so you get the idea, we've got critical parent and nurturing parent. This will help you communicate better, and it'll help you to run rings around people and work. Because, you know, especially if you've got challenge the critical parents, but challenge my main response, if I'm tired and in a bad mood, I can get quite feisty if the situation warrants it. But normally now, if somebody is critical and condescending to me, I just say, look, change your tone and lower you know, the volume of your voice if you want to continue this conversation. Otherwise, I'm walking. It's up to you. And they look at you as if to say, ooh, and that way it's a treat. They will normally then drop right into child and try and make you feel guilty. And again, I had this recently where, again, I say, don't try and make me feel guilty either. Take responsibility for the way you communicate to people. Don't act like a little child out now because I'm not born for it. And it's a great way to be. You can run rings around people. Where's the nurturing parent? I've done something wrong there. There we go, nurturing parents. There we go. Critical parents, I'm from that one. No respect. Okay, let me move on. So the adult state now. The adult state, I'm going to try and interpret this, not from slides so much, but from the way I know it works through experience. It's very much that part of ourselves that is logical, that is rational. And as we grow in awareness, we become aware of our conditioning and the things, the patterns, psychological patterns that are not working in our life. We become aware of our shortcomings. We become aware of our character defects, and it takes humility to grow as a person. And that's why I cringed a lot when I've done this training, because I was very honest with myself. And the ego rebels against that, doesn't like that, doesn't like to show its weaknesses. But with the adult ego trait, if we grow it, that can take control at this point and say, actually, you know, the way I'm behaving there, it can logically, objectively analyse the other ego state, see what's working and what's not working, and work towards dropping them patterns. Okay? So the adult, whereas the nurturing parent and the critical parent are very much learned behaviour from other people. And they're based on emotion, the reactions, they're full of we emote when we deliver transactions from the critical parent or nurturing parent ego state. The adult doesn't. That's the difference. Because adults and parents, you can get them confused, but they're very, very different in transactional analysis. Is that okay? Everybody getting a grasp of that? Yeah? Yeah, okay. Right, let's go from the beginning. When we come into the world, basically, our main two caregivers are our parents. Not always, but significant others. And they will treat us in certain ways. They will parent us in different ways. And we'll devise ways of responding to that. So if their script messages and commands are authoritarian, we may become submissive. And we may carry that submissiveness right throughout our lives. So life script is the programs we devise to respond first and foremost to the way our parents and significant others treat us. And then we get script attributions. At this point, we've only got the child ego state. We're only infants, we're only young. So we get script attributions. This is, you're no good, you're brilliant at that. There's a word come into it as well. You know, you're ugly, you're this, you're that. and they imprint on us. They psychologically can do a lot of damage. So we'll also gather beliefs about ourselves as well. And all of these will be part of the child ego state, which independent of chronological age, we can go into that state any time in our life. We can regress into that state, and we do it frequently. But if we're going through our life, and let's say we've had authoritarian parents, and we become very submissive as a result of the messages, the commands, script commands we had as children, we become transparent. We don't have a voice of our own. So then we need to develop a part of our psyche that can lead the way in our self-development. And as we get to about the age of 8, before 8, by the way, comes the parent ego state. The child starts to threaten the siblings and friends. Oh, I'll tell your mum on that, that's wrong, you shouldn't do that. It's picking up on the script commands of its parents. And it's, if you like, it's administering discipline on its own at that point, or its own commands. So the parent ego state starts to develop at a young age as well. Round about 7 or 8, the critical factor or the adult starts to develop. Okay? And the adult is that part of ourselves that is computative, if you like. It's rational, it's logical, it can work things out, it can challenge patterns. So we've got to see ourselves, again, not as a unified whole, but here we're seeing each other much like in object relations, as parts. But we call them states here, and the states that we go into frequently. So, can you give me an example, Eileen, of how you may use your child's ego state to respond to something?
Well, it's a bit like, say, you've got well, it's coming out now. Someone looking for something, and where is it? Well, I haven't got it. And you've got like sort of that. Defensive.
Yeah. Yes, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you sort of get a call on and yeah, that's one. Anybody else think of any other ways you respond in child ego state?
When not throwing your way.
So what you do there, how would you respond?
Well, I hope I don't now, like I have in the past. Just like, if you're not going your way, it's like, there's nothing never goes right for me.
So you throw your bat out the pram metaphorically. I do that, I can still do it today. I very rarely do it today, but I still can on my off days. It's nothing to be ashamed of. Yeah, but that's a reaction. It's a reaction that comes from the child ego state. It causes lots of problems in relationships. This is brilliant for relationship counselling as well. Because quite often the adaptive child is attracted to a parent for yes. But in this case, sometimes the child rebels. They even need the person, the adult in the child ego state has had a need to have a parent partner. That's what they've needed. But if they start to grow up, then the dynamics of the relationship are going to change. It's no longer going to be opposites. The relationship is no longer opposites child-parent. The child's growing up. Then you've got parent to parent or adult to parent. And the dynamics that brought them together have really changed. And quite often so does the relationship. So the person in the adult state is likely to speak in an even tone. That's what I find when you get somebody who is condescending, speaking in an even tone, it knocks them off balance. Okay? Keep eye contact with them, it's quite intimidating in some ways. Keep an even tone of voice. You watch that condescendingness drop from most of them. Okay? If it doesn't drop, run, because it's going to get aggressive. Okay? Having the right posture and use open gestures. Okay, yeah, quite stern, that's just body language. Okay, be alert and thoughtful about a problem they are facing. Okay, that's right. It's about awareness, really. But it's about not being a puppet to your emotions, the adult ego state. Yeah? Okay. Clarify the situation by careful questioning. Again, it's like the internal counsellor, if you like, in some ways. It's like you're playing counsellor to your own internal child and your own internal parents. It's like you're mediating between the two. That's probably the best way to describe it. So here we've got three parts of yourself. We've got the adult who's taking the inner counselling role, and it's coming very much from a logical, analytical position. Empathy still needs to be used, but it's in a sense giving counsel to your own inner child and your inner parent. Yeah? Okay. So hypothesize and process information and use words like correct, how, what, why, practical, quality. Very, very much logical, rational. Okay. So, these are just some of the... now we're moving on to the free child. So we've done the adaptive child, AC, you'll see that as. That's the child that adapts its responses in accordance with the information that's coming in, the way it's treated. That's formulation of life script at that point as well. Okay, the free child, okay, so, a based on an adaptive child may use words such as can't, try, hope, please, perhaps, wish. It becomes a lot of please as well. It's quite submissive in many ways. It can sound sulky, whiny, and placating, meaning it wants to please people. You'll recognise yourself in all of these, I'm sure. Come across as innocent, helpless, sad, scared. That's me, big guys. The helpless child, right? And act in a defiant, ashamed, or compliant way. These are all ways that can be. So think of the way, those of you who've got children, watch the way your children behave with you in the future.
Whiny.
To elicit your response, to get attention. And watch the way you treat them back. And you'll learn more than I can teach you on the board here. Okay? Right, so now we're looking at basic human needs and ego states. Here we go. Parents. The parents are split into critical and nurturing. Okay, the critical parent is lecturing, criticising, many oughts, shoulds and don'ts. The nurturing parent can be consoling. It's what it says, it's nurturing. Taking care of others, sympathy. Okay, the nurturing parent can be very much played on as well. Lots of people come into counselling because they want to help others, but they don't really want to help others. As I see this right from the beginning, they're running away from their own issues, most of them. It's another way. I'm not saying you lot in here, but I see it with people, I just want to, they come very much from the nature of it. I just want to help others, I just want to help others. And as time goes by, I guarantee you, they've got a lot of issues, these people. And it's a way, if you like, of ignoring their own issues. And then people, always, without exception, hit the ground at some point. Okay. It's all right coming into counselling because you want to help people, but make sure that you do deal with your own issues. A lot of people use other people's issues as a diversion to not acknowledge their own, and that ain't gonna work. Okay? So, adults, objective, rational, oriented towards problem solving, de-emphasises emotion or unemotional. Adaptive child, modified behaviour to conform to adult expectations, manipulative, submissive. The adaptive child is very, very manipulative as well, quite often. Okay? So we all drop into that. Okay? That's what you'll find in a lot of arguments. Somebody in critical parent. So critical parent meets critical parent, they start shouting at each other. What generally happens at that point is a number of things. One, I've had enough of you, I'm off. Communication breaks down, nothing can happen. Two, aggression, violence, nothing gets sorted. The most common ones is communication breaks down. No, you get a match, nobody's changing position, so it's walk away from. Okay? The other one is that they drop into chat. So somebody shouts at you and you shout, who the hell do you think you're talking to, and immediately they drop into child mode and try and make you feel guilty. That's very common. I always drop into adult then and say, look, the way you just behaved towards me was unacceptable. Change your behaviour or forget it. That, I'm in adult mode at that point. It doesn't mean, being quite honest, it says unemotional, but there's always an element of it. I think it's evolved a bit, transactional analysis now, in a way that they do accept that even the adult comes from some emotion. It's very unusual when you just drop all emotion. Normally when I'm in adult mode, I'm fuming. Because if somebody's just being... I'm fuming, but I act as if I'm quite unemotional. And like you say, it unbalances people normally. It works great.
Well, what happens if do you have a couple and they're both in critical parents, is a parent?
If critical parent mode, the chances...
What happens to that relationship?
The chances are you will never... If they're permanently in critical parent mode, the chances are they're never going to come for counselling. Because they would probably come from, when we do relationship bits, negative mirror image. And you see these people, they argue all the time. A lot of them people have never had love and attention and whatever when they were younger. But the norm has become arguments, it's their behaviour. And if they were to love each other, they'd be fighting to death. So they're happy to fight and whatever. They go on like that right through their lives.
Say persons grew from child mode and wanting to, and they've just ruined in themselves.
Yeah.
And they're both of them. What would happen to that relationship? Because obviously the critical parents would be looking at this, the one they fell in love with, who was in a child mode and they grew. What would happen to that?
Well, you don't know. I mean, if they both grow,
yeah. And
they're both lenient, the chances of the relationship would survive it. But quite often one gets stuck, and it's often the critical parent or the nurturing parent.
Yeah.
They have a need to mother or father somebody.
Yeah.
Talk about a partner.
Yeah.
And when that gets taken away from them, then they rebel and the relationship becomes quite rocky.
Yeah.
And if you do that type of stuff and they split up, it's a success really, that's the way it needs to go.
Yeah.
Don't think it's a failure because they split up.
People just grow and change.
Exactly.
It's, revolving constantly.
Yes. Well, a lot of people are
Some
not.
people aren't, I agree, yes.
That's where we get the problem. If we're changing constantly in that state of flux I've talked about time and time again, you'll be going through these ego states. Watch, the best way to learn this is have an awareness of it now, let alone when you're communicating to people out there, watch what mode you use, and you will go from child to adult. I'm quite often in the playful child mood in work, the devil, I was up to something I shouldn't be up to. And I like that, it's my way of letting off steam. Okay, and that's the natural child. It can be a little bugger, but it's also the free child. And in spiritual terms, people often return to that as the soul child. It's the part of you that really just wants to enjoy life, irrespective of anything else, really. So, where the adaptive child is not. The adaptive child is always on its guard, really, responding in different ways. Okay, so an adaptive child modifies behaviour to conform to adult expectations. That's the crux of the life script. The child modifies its behaviour to conform to adult expectations because it's reliant on the adults at that point. But if it's still doing it when it's 45 and it's problematic, then there's something wrong. It can also be manipulative and submissive. The natural child is playful, impulsive, naturally curious, creative and fun-loving, rebellious sort of thing. I think when I'm doing something musically and I feel really emotional and my guitar may become a conduit for how I'm feeling, I think that's the mode I'm in that child, that free child mode. Very, very open, very emotional as well. Yeah, does that make sense to everyone? This starts to evolve bit by bit, by the way. So recognise the child. I'm not mad on these things, but use words such as wow, great, ouch, talk loudly, energetic. You've seen a little kid care. Knock half the aisle down in the supermarket and, you know, they don't care, do they? So use spontaneous gestures and expressions. The curious, that's another. The creative, the fun-loving, and the changeable. There's nothing wrong with that. But they can become a pain in the arse as well because they don't really care about others as well. So this is where we're going to go into another level, if you like. Complementary transfer. Where is the video that we... there should be a video. I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll watch the first video here now, and then we'll have a break. Okay?